Grandpa, that's what Marcus called him. Not as a term of endearment, but as a dismissal. Marcus Williams, 24 years old, a newly hired conductor for the MTA, said it with a smirk every single time. Hey, Grandpa, you gonna make it through another shift? Or, Grandpa, times have changed. Maybe you should let the young guys handle this. Robert Chen, 68 years old, never responded. He just nodded quietly and went back to checking the control panel of the number 6 train, the same train he'd been operating for the last 15 years on the Lexington Avenue line. His hands, weathered and scarred, moved over the controls with the kind of muscle memory that came from 4 decades of service. His uniform was always clean, always pressed, and always just a little too big on his thin frame. His face was lined with age, his hair completely white, and his eyes a deep brown that seemed to look right through you without judgment. To Marcus and to most of the younger MTA staff, Bobby Chen was just another old-timer counting down the days to retirement. He didn't use the new digital systems. He didn't attend the optional training seminars. He showed up, drove his train, and went home. Reliable, sure, but unremarkable. Forgettable. Just 2 weeks away from his retirement party, and then he'd fade into the background like all the others. It was a Friday evening, 6:45 p.m., and the number 6 train was packed. Rush hour in New York City was never pleasant, but Fridays were especially brutal. Commuters squeezed into every available space, their faces buried in phones, headphones in, the universal signal of urban isolation. The train pulled out of 51st Street Station, heading downtown toward Brooklyn Bridge. Bobby sat in the operator's cabin, his hand resting lightly on the controls, his eyes scanning the tracks ahead through the small front window. Beside him, Marcus scrolled through social media, half paying attention to the radio chatter. Bobby, you know the new digital control system training is next week, right? Marcus said without looking up. You gonna make it before you retire? Or you just gonna skip it? I'll manage, Bobby said quietly. Marcus laughed. Man, you've been doing this the same way since the 80s. Times have changed, Grandpa. Maybe it's good you're retiring. Let the new generation take over. Bobby didn't respond. He never did. His gaze remained fixed on the tunnel ahead, the rhythmic clack of the wheels on the tracks, the only sound he seemed to care about. In the 5th car, about 100 feet behind the operator's cabin, 3 young men boarded at 51st Street. They were dressed in oversized hoodies and baggy jeans, bandanas tied around their faces. Jaden, the leader, was 19 years old, tall and wiry, with cold eyes that scanned the crowded car like a predator sizing up prey. His 2 friends, Marcus and Terrell, both 17, flanked him. They moved through the car with deliberate swagger, shoulders back, chests out, making sure everyone saw them. Jaden pulled a knife from his pocket. It wasn't a big knife, maybe 4 inches, but in the confined space of a subway car, it might as well have been a sword. He held it casually, almost lazily, letting the overhead lights catch the blade. Yo, Jaden said loudly, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the train. This our car now. Y'all understand? The effect was immediate. Passengers froze. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A man in a suit slowly backed toward the door connecting to the next car. A teenage girl pulled out her headphones, her eyes wide with fear. Empty your pockets, Jaden continued, walking down the aisle. Phones, wallets, jewelry. Don't make me ask twice. One by one, terrified passengers complied. A middle-aged man handed over his wallet. A young woman, tears streaming down her face, gave up her phone. An elderly woman fumbled with her necklace, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't unclasp it. Terrell ripped it from her neck. Someone in the back of the car, hidden in the crowd, pressed the emergency call button. In the operator's cabin, the radio crackled to life. Train 6-214, we have a 10-85, assault in progress, car 5, NYPD transit en route. Repeat, assault in progress. Can you stop at next station? Marcus's head snapped up from his phone. Oh shit! Bobby, did you hear that? There's a fight. We gotta... I heard, Bobby said calmly. We're 2 minutes from Brooklyn Bridge. I'll slow down. Slow down? Marcus's voice rose in pitch. We need to stop. We need to... Bobby picked up the radio handset. Dispatch, train 6214. slowing approach to Brooklyn Bridge. Suspects reported armed with blades, moving toward front cars. Copy that, 6214. NYPDETA, 4 minutes. Do not engage. Secure your cabin and wait for police. Marcus was breathing fast, his hands shaking. Bobby, man, we gotta lock this door. What if they come up here? What if... Marcus, Bobby said, his voice steady and low. Breathe. But Jaden and his crew were already moving forward. They pushed through the connecting door into the fourth car, then the third, their confidence growing with every frightened face they passed. Passengers scrambled to get out of their way, pressing themselves against the walls, against the doors, anywhere to avoid confrontation. By the time they reached the second car, Jaden was high on adrenaline. He banged on the door to the operator's cabin with the hilt of his knife. Yo, driver, Jaden shouted. Open this door or we start cutting people. You hear me? Inside the cabin, Marcus was pale. Bobby, we gotta hide. Bobby stood up slowly, his joints creaking slightly. He stretched his back, rolled his shoulders, and looked at Marcus with calm, steady eyes. Marcus, I need you to do exactly what I say. Bobby, no, you can't. Lock this door behind me, Bobby continued, his voice firm but not unkind. When we stop at Brooklyn Bridge, open all the doors immediately. Everyone gets off except those three. Understand? Bobby, you're 68 years old. They have knives. Just wait for the cops. Bobby placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Son, I need you to trust me. Lock the door. Before Marcus could argue further, Bobby opened the cabin door and stepped out, closing it behind him. Marcus, terrified and confused, locked it with shaking hands. Bobby stood in the narrow space between the operator's cabin and the passenger car. The inner car connector was tight, maybe 3 feet wide, with a metal floor that vibrated with the motion of the train. Jaden was right in front of him, knife in hand, his 2 friends just behind. Yo, old man, Jaden said, waving the knife. You the driver? Open that door or I swear to God. Bobby raised his hands slowly, palms out, in a gesture of calm. Train's stopping in 1 minute. Police are waiting at the station. You boys should get off while you can. Jaden laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. Police? Man, we own this train. We ain't scared of no cops, and we sure as hell ain't scared of you. Bobby's eyes didn't leave Jaden's face, but his peripheral vision was taking in everything. The emergency brake handle on the left wall, the overhead grab bar, the narrow space that limited movement. Jaden's dominant hand, his right, holding the knife with the blade pointed forward. His 2 friends, overconfident, not expecting resistance from an old man. A memory flashed through Bobby's mind, unbidden but vivid. He was 19 years old, crouched in the dense, wet jungle of Vietnam. His instructor, a grizzled Marine sergeant with a face like carved stone, was whispering in his ear. Force recon, don't fight fair, Chen. We use the environment, we control the space, and we never ever panic. Bobby's voice was calm. Last chance, son. Jaden's face twisted with anger. You gonna die, old man. He lunged forward, the knife aimed at Bobby's chest. What happened next took less than 5 seconds, but to Marcus, watching through the small window in the cabin door, it felt like slow motion. Bobby sidestepped to his right, his body moving with a fluidity that seemed impossible for someone his age. The narrow space worked in his favor. Jaden's arm swung wide, the knife missing Bobby by inches. As Jaden stumbled forward, off balance, Bobby reached up and yanked the emergency brake handle. The train's brakes engaged with a metallic shriek. The entire train lurched violently. Passengers who were standing flew forward. Jaden, mid-lunge, was thrown off his feet, but Bobby, anticipating the sudden stop, had braced himself against the wall. He was still standing. Before Jaden could recover, Bobby moved. He grabbed Jaden's wrist, the one holding the knife, with both hands. A sharp, controlled twist, and the knife clattered to the floor. Bobby swept Jaden's legs out from under him with a precise kick to the back of the knee, and the young man went down hard, face first onto the metal floor. Bobby dropped his own weight onto Jaden's back, pinning him, one knee pressing into his spine, one hand securing both of Jaden's wrists behind his back. Terrell, one of the friends, tried to rush forward to help. Bobby, without looking, kicked the connecting door shut. The pneumatic lock engaged, trapping Terrell in the passenger car. He pounded on the door, shouting, but he couldn't get through. The third gang member, seeing what had just happened, turned and ran back into the crowd of passengers, disappearing. The train came to a complete stop inside Brooklyn Bridge Station. Outside on the platform, a dozen NYPD transit officers were waiting, hands on their service weapons. The doors hissed open. Passengers poured out, a flood of terrified, relieved people pushing and shoving to get off the train. The police moved in, methodical and fast. An officer reached the inner car connector and found Bobby still kneeling on Jaden's back, holding him in place. The knife was on the floor several feet away. Jaden was breathing hard, his face pressed against the metal, but he wasn't struggling. He knew it was over. "Sir, let him go," the officer said. "We've got him." Bobby released Jaden's wrists and stood up slowly, his knees protesting. "He's all yours, officer." Two officers moved in, pulling Jaden to his feet and cuffing him. Another officer secured the knife as evidence. The third gang member was pulled from the crowd in the next car, also cuffed. Marcus stumbled out of the operator's cabin, his face a mask of shock. "Bobby, how? What just?" An older NYPD transit sergeant, a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and a face weathered by years on the job, pushed through the crowd of officers. He saw Bobby and stopped dead in his tracks. "Chen?" the sergeant said, his voice full of disbelief. "Bobby Chen, is that you?" Bobby gave a small, tired smile. "Evening, Sergeant Rodriguez." Rodriguez turned to the younger officers, who were staring at Bobby with confused expressions. "You kids don't know who this is, do you?" They shook their heads. Rodriguez took a deep breath. "This is Robert Chen, United States Marine Corps, Force Reconnaissance. 2 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Desert Storm. This man trained half the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit instructors in close quarters combat back in the 90s. He's a legend." Marcus's mouth fell open. "Bobby," Rodriguez continued, "what the hell are you doing driving trains?" Bobby shrugged. "Needed a quiet job after I retired. Trains don't shoot back." Rodriguez let out a short laugh, but his eyes were serious. "You saved a lot of lives tonight, brother." Bobby didn't respond to that. He just looked down the platform, where paramedics were checking on shaken passengers, where mothers held their children tight, where a young pregnant woman sat on a bench, crying with relief. Rodriguez turned to Marcus. "You work with him?" Marcus nodded, still unable to speak. "Then you're lucky," Rodriguez said. "Learn everything you can from this man." As the police finished securing the scene and taking statements, Rodriguez pulled Bobby aside. "You remember the fall of 2003? Rodriguez asked quietly. Bobby thought for a moment, then nodded. "You were a rookie. Vest too big. Got jumped by 2 guys with knives near Grand Central." Rodriguez smiled. "I froze, man. I was young. I was scared, and I froze. And this guy in an MTA uniform, just some random train operator, stepped in, took both of them down before I even processed what was happening. Saved my life. You never told me you were a Marine." "Didn't seem important," Bobby said. "It's always been important," Rodriguez replied. 2 weeks later, the MTA held a small retirement ceremony for Robert Chen at their headquarters in Lower Manhattan. It wasn't a big event. Bobby had specifically requested that it be kept low-key, but word had gotten out about what happened on the number 6 train, and the room was more crowded than expected. Passengers who had been on that train, police officers, MTA staff, and Marcus, dressed in his cleanest uniform, standing in the front row. The MTA director of operations, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, stood at a small podium. "Robert Chen has driven over 2 million miles for this city," she began, "without a single incident. Well, until 2 weeks ago." The room erupted in laughter. "He never asked for recognition," she continued, her tone becoming more serious. "He never told anyone about his past. He just showed up, did his job, and made this city a little bit safer every single day. That kind of quiet service, that kind of humility is what this city is built on. Bobby, we're going to miss you." She handed him a plaque. Bobby accepted it with a nod. clearly uncomfortable with the attention. He didn't give a speech. He just said, "Thank you. It's been an honor." After the ceremony, as people mingled and ate catered sandwiches, Marcus approached Bobby. "Bobby," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For calling you Grandpa, for acting like you didn't matter. You saved everyone on that train, and I froze. I didn't do anything." Bobby looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "You did what you were supposed to do, Marcus. You stayed calm. You locked the door. You followed instructions. That's not nothing. But I didn't fight. I didn't." "You'll have your moment," Bobby interrupted gently. "And when it comes, you won't freeze. Trust yourself." Marcus nodded, wiping at his eyes. Outside the building, as Bobby was leaving, he was stopped by a young woman holding a toddler's hand. Her husband stood beside her, and she was visibly pregnant. "Mr. Chen?" she said hesitantly. Bobby turned. "I was on that train," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "Car 5. I was one of the people they took my phone and my wallet, and I thought they were going to hurt my son, and then you stopped them. I just wanted to say thank you. If you hadn't been there." Bobby shook his head. "Just doing my job, ma'am." The little boy, no more than 4 years old, looked up at Bobby with wide, curious eyes. "Mister, are you a superhero?" Bobby crouched down, his knees creaking, so he was at eye level with the boy. He smiled. "No, son. Just an old train driver." The boy looked unconvinced, but he smiled back. As Bobby walked away from the building, his plaque tucked under his arm, the sounds of the city surrounded him, the honking of taxis, the rumble of a subway train passing beneath the street, the chatter of a million lives intersecting in the greatest city in the world. He'd spent 40 years serving this city in different ways. First as a Marine, protecting it from threats most people would never know about. Then as a train operator, moving its people safely through the underground arteries that kept it alive. He passed a subway entrance. The familiar green globe sign glowed in the late afternoon light. For a moment he paused, looking down into the station. He could still hear the trains. He always would. Robert Chen's story reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they wear faded MTA uniforms and punch a clock for 40 years. Sometimes they are dismissed as too old, too slow, out of touch with modern times. But true courage doesn't fade with age. True skill doesn't rust. And the quiet protectors among us, the ones we overlook every single day, are often the very people who stand between us and danger when it matters most. Vigilance never retires. It just finds new uniforms to wear. What would you have done in Bobby's position? Would you have stepped out to face 3 armed attackers, or would you have waited for help? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of quiet courage moved you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Valor Chronicles for more stories of unsung heroes who walk among us. Thank you for watching.